Here we go. Another episode of Far From Ideal. And this is the third time that we're trying to record this episode.
It was actually the first one we did, wasn't it? Which was
oh my God,
questionable.
Was
it was the first one, yeah, when I didn't even have a mic.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, so this is a long way on from that. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Is that the intro?
Yeah, I mean, that's the film we're talking about. This is a film that you wanted to talk about initially,
yeah,
right?
I can't remember why now. No, I can't remember why. It's because it made me so angry.
Yeah.
And at the time when we started this, I thought that would be the most fun to listen to.
It was such a long time ago, and it was so different in terms of everything we were doing and how we were having these kinds of conversations.
Such a long time ago in December.
No, it was earlier than that, wasn't it? Oh my God. It feels like a very long time ago. It feels like we've been doing this forever already. I come at it with a slightly different perspective this time, I think, to the last couple of times that we've talked about it, because I actually rewatched it this time.
Wow, that makes a difference.
I mean, it does, but I also really started to think a bit more about Tarantino and his career. I watched Jackie Brown for the first time, which is crazy that I hadn't seen that.
That's my favourite.
Okay, so that interests me. Because
just not going to talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
We definitely are, because this is the thing. I find Jackie Brown and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to probably be his most closely related films in a lot of ways.
No.
Yeah.
What? Jackie Brown is one of the most iconic female protagonists of all films, not just Tarantino films. And tell me who the equivalent is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I'm not for a second saying that it's similar in that way. What I'm saying is that in terms of the type of film it is, they are both what you might call hangout films. They're films that put you into a world. And if you like that world, it's the kind of film that you might rewatch every couple of years because you like being in that world, right?
No, I reject your hypothesis.
They are so much slower and so much more measured, so much less violent than pretty much everything else he's done. I completely agree. If you want to talk about the female side of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I liked it more rewatching it this time. It's impossible for me to get past how much of a prop Sharon Tate is.
Yeah, and it's not just Sharon Tate, it's every woman in it.
I'm struggling, as you say that, to even think of another woman in it. I suppose you have the Italian actress that he brings home that pretty much only
Margaret
speaks
Qualley.
Italian. Oh, yes. So you've got the Manson girls as well.
Yeah, you've got the child actor.
Yes, you got the child actor.
You've got the bitch wife.
Yeah.
All caricatures.
And they're also transitory in and out of the plot as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't add anything. They're not whole people.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think the really odd thing about having Sharon Tate in this and not treating her as a whole person is that it's a revenge story.
Yeah, it's the kind of revisionist historical revenge story that he did with Inglorious Basterds and Django as well.
And he's already proven that he can do this kind of revenge story with Kill Bill, where it's a female-led revenge story. It strikes me as odd. But I think I have said this to you before. I listened to Bill Burr talking about this film and how much he loved this film.
Wait, who?
And Bill Burr, the comedian.
Oh, Bill Burr. I thought you were saying Bill Burr, like Baba. I was like, who is this character?
Bill Burr, the cartoon character.
Like a hobbit or something.
So like a Barney friend or something. No, I listened to him talking about it, and the way that he was talking about how much he loved this film, it goes back to that hangout vibe of it, where it's driving around LA in really nice cars, smoking cigarettes and cigars. It's a very specific vibe, which is definitely not made for me or you.
You've mentioned that before, if it's not made for us, but it's fine that there are lots of different types of films and we're not going to love all of them. That's a kind of given. For me, the issue is that the vibe that is being presented is deeply problematic.
In what sense? Because it's portraying a deeply problematic era, right?
Yeah, but with no recognition of that. If you take Inglorious Basterds,
yeah,
I don't love that film, just as a side note, but we know who the villains are. And Django as well. We know who the villains are. It's a deeply problematic time, and yet we're seeing it from a modern perspective. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a deeply problematic time from a deeply problematic perspective. There is nothing modern about the portrayal of anybody in it at all.
It's a massive reflection of every single influence and every single film that he's made put together and churned out again, right? It's super, super postmodern. It's super meta-textual, as with everything that he does. There's something about Tarantino which is often devoid of societal commentary. One of the really interesting things I saw about him, looking back into him, is his rivalry with Paul Thomas Anderson, where he was consistently, I think, seeing someone who was operating on a different kind of level to him intellectually, right? He's great at watching a bunch of stuff, chewing it up and spitting it back out again. But in terms of doing any sort of societal commentary, I did think about this. I like Tarantino films in the way that I like watching a skateboarding video. Like, there's something very teenage about it. There's something very simple about it a lot of the time. It doesn't ask you big, deep questions.
No, but it has an incredibly wide reach, and his films get held up as examples of great cinema, and I think that's dangerous.
That's external from the film itself, though, right?
He's revered for those things and for, like you say, creating these worlds. But also, I disagree with a lot of what you've said. First of all, I don't think that Jackie Brown and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood do have that much in common. I think that in terms of a vibe, nothing happens in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Everything that does is awful, but what does happen is minimal. In Jackie Brown, loads of stuff happens. It's closer to Pulp Fiction. We don't have the same time jumps, but there are intersecting wants and needs and conflicting character arcs that create tension in a way that is super engaging, and the dialogue is brilliant. The dialogue in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, one of the main characters doesn't have any.
It's probably his weakest film in terms of dialogue. I would, definitely give you that.
It's his weakest film in more than just dialogue. The editing, we've talked about this before, maybe not on the podcast, but Tarantino worked with Sally Menke for years on so many of his amazing films.
Yeah.
And you need a good editor to harness whatever it is he's doing, because you can really see the difference. What was the last one? I think the last one she did was Inglorious Basterds. And after that, they just got super long and meandering. And even Hateful Eight, which I did love, it was already spilling over a little bit. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in particular, you can have a vibe without having 20 minutes of Brad Pitt driving.
Sure, yeah. I didn't feel it that egregious this time watching it back in terms of him just driving around. He does drive around a lot. And I think, so he sees Margaret Qualley, he sees her 3 times in the car while he's driving around in the car before he picks her up.
He picks her up on the 3rd time, yeah.
So there is a good amount of that.
No, that's not my point. That's not what I'm talking about. Him driving around and picking her up, or even seeing her, there is a point to him driving around. What I'm talking about is lights behind the open top car, music on the radio, him driving around LA, and that's it. That doesn't do anything, doesn't tell us character, doesn't tell us story. We already know the setting. You can have one shot of that and it could be a nice shot. That's all we need.
But again, this goes back to that sort of Bill Burr, people who like this kind of film, and people who like this film specifically. It is that focus on cool guy, drive cool car.
That's so boring.
I don't love those sections. And there is also you say it doesn't say much about character. It is that contradiction between him and Rick Dalton. You've got the real tough guy, the old school Hollywood guy, versus the guy literally tearing his hair out and making fun of himself neurotically in his trailer when he gets a line wrong.
But that has already happened. We've already seen much better examples of this comparison between the two of them already, and those bits don't tell us anything new. It goes back to the editing. The opening sequence where you have this whole bounty law introduction and then there's an interview. You've got Rick Dalton, but you've also got Cliff behind.
Yeah.
The fact that he is sat on a chair a couple of feet behind, we can see already there's a power dynamic, but he's so far behind that Rick has to turn around to speak to him. So actually the power is weighted in that direction. Yeah. That's what I mean. That is what, if we're going to commend Tarantino for stuff, is things like that. And there just was not enough of that in this film. And what there was problematic. It's so deeply misogynistic without criticism, to the point that we are supposed to congratulate as an audience Brad Pitt's character, Cliff, for checking how old she is when she offers him a blowjob, and then being like, I don't want to go to prison for poontang. Not because he doesn't want to engage with that, but because he's not going to go to prison for it. That's not something that we should be congratulating people for. Is that the highest bar we have?
Sure, yeah. But even with him doing that and saying that, I don't think we're supposed to revere him as a particularly non-creepy kind of guy. He literally killed his wife, this character. We're not supposed to think of him necessarily as a good guy just because of that moment, right?
No, but even that's ambiguous. And I think this is important. It's not stated. There are rumors that he killed his wife. And then the only scene that we get is them on the boat where she's nagging him and putting him down.
And it is arguably played for laughs.
It's not just played for laughs. We're supposed to think maybe he did kill her, but she deserved it.
Yeah, sure.
And that's so dangerous to have that. This is why I think it goes beyond cool vibe. Let's just enjoy LA in the 60s.
60s, 70s kind of era, yeah. It's transitional sort of time, yeah.
The Manson family murders was that end of the dream hippie era, right?
Yeah, is it 69?
69.
Yeah, I think one of the things that he talks about a lot with... One of the things that he talks about a lot with this film is that it is that transitional period between eras, right? Old Hollywood, New Hollywood.
The fact that this film exists and won so many awards, New Hollywood is still this. This is why I don't think there's any commentary. We're still there. The fact that this film did so well, the fact that it was so revered.
Was it revered? 100% it made lots and lots of money. Is this considered to be among his best films or...
It's changed as time has gone on, but when it first came out, because I remember seeing it and being so angry that I couldn't sleep for 3 days.
Wow.
And I was looking for anyone who was writing something that kind of tapped into what I was feeling about it. And everyone was just praise and praise for all of these reviews. And then eventually, after a couple of months, then people started being like, maybe the foot thing, maybe we shouldn't have had Sharon Tate recreated and not had any character whatsoever. Maybe there are some problems with this, but
it's just strange as much as anything, though.
What do you mean it's strange?
It's problematic in terms of her representation, but it's also it doesn't make any sense to me to have her, because she was actually in the film way more than I thought she was on watching it back.
Not doing anything, she's just dancing.
Yes, exactly. That's my point. The first time I watched it, I had this impression that she was barely in the film. Watching it back, I was aware that she was in the film a lot more than I had thought that she was, but she's in the film a lot more than I thought she was, doing nothing, saying nothing, going to a bookstore and getting a book in one scene, right? And that's it.
It's so baseline in that she's wearing glasses and she goes to buy a book so that we know that she's clever, right?
Yeah.
And then never says anything after that. It's so disappointing when you have characters like The Bride, characters like Jackie Brown. Even going back to Jackie Brown as a comparison, when you were saying that the other women in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are transient, I want to say Anna Faris, it's not Anna Faris, but you know the character in Jackie Brown what's her name? You know who I mean.
Oh, Melanie.
Yeah, Melanie.
Yeah, played by Bridget. Oh my God. Bridget Fonda.
Oh, it's Bridget Fonda.
Bridget Fonda.
Wow.
Yeah.
You could argue that she's quite a transitory character, except that she's so complete and she has a really integral part to play.
Yeah, she's an integral cog in the machine of what happens in the film. That being said, anything that we say about the narrative structure of Jackie Brown, I haven't read Rum Punch, so I don't know enough about what he's pulled, because it's based on a book. It's the only thing that he's done which is based on a book.
You know that he wrote a book of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I did. I haven't read it. I do know that in that book he clears certain things up. So for example, with the Cliff killing his wife, he does clear up that he 100% did kill his wife, right? So that is something that is mentioned in the book apparently.
I have found some bits of it online.
Oh, interesting.
But basically the book reads, it's not prose, it reads as a screenplay. So it's just a slightly longer version of the film. And he's a good writer in a lot of ways, has been a good writer, has written good things. He wrote True Romance, which is one of the best screenplays of that period.
I would agree.
And yet this book is, I've just found
He's been talking about writing a book for a long time.
Yeah. The buzzer on Marvin Schwartz's desk dictaphone makes a noise. The William Morris agent's finger holds the lever down on the box. Is that my 10:30 you're buzzing me about, Miss Himmelstein? Yes, it is, Mr. Schwartz. His secretary's voice pipes out of the tiny speaker. Mr. Dalton is waiting outside. Marvin pushes down the lever again. It's a fucking screenplay.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned to you before about there's a comic book author that wrote a novel.
Oh, yeah?
There's a book called Gun Machine by Warren Ellis. And it's so visual in its prose. It doesn't read like a novel because someone is so used to writing in a specific mode, and that's what they're good at. That's what they veer towards, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think he was talking at one stage about turning The Hateful Eight into a book instead of making it into a film because it'd been leaked online, the script, at one point.
Oh, deep.
Yeah, so he was potentially going in that direction, but then he changes his mind a lot, this guy.
Okay, Hateful Eight, another great example. There is one woman in that film, and she is such an interesting character. Yeah,
I think the biggest thing with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it doesn't have that Rube Goldberg-y feeling of a really good script, for sure.
Because it's not a good script.
No, I wouldn't argue that it is a particularly good script. I would argue that it's a very well-made film in a lot of ways. It hits what it's trying to hit very effectively. It hits that era very effectively. The production design is beautiful in terms of all the billboards and every little element like that.
All the details, the kind of beer that Cliff is drinking. The thing that I resent about this film is that you have Rick and Cliff as really interesting opposites and kind of antagonists of each other, but also it's a buddy movie in a lot of ways. So why is Sharon Tate even in it? Because she doesn't add anything to it, and by having her there is a need to explore that. What is her role apart from just providing an outlet for Rick's jealousy, which we already understand anyway because he's a deeply jealous person and bitter regardless, as an exploration of masculinity between the two of them? That's also really interesting, and if you stick to that, then fine. But because of the female characters, because they have been put in there, then it is important to talk about them. I understand the arguments of it was the time and that's not the point of this film and that kind of thing. If you've chosen to put them in, then it is the point.
There are probably two really interesting films in this film. You've got the Sharon Tate revenge fantasy revisionist history film, possibly where you go down the route of Sharon Tate being the one with agency, right?
If it is revisionist, why is she not the one that goes to the Manson ranch? Why is she not the one that engages? Why is she not the one that actually does something? He's shown that he can do that in other films. And that's what Shoshana does in Inglorious Basterds.
Yeah.
And it is intentional. It is always intentional. And that's why I find it so problematic, because he has chosen for her not to be. And then when he's challenged on it, referenced it at the beginning, but for people who haven't seen it, he gets asked, in quite an understanding manner, I thought, asking...
Oh, a Q&A.
Quentin, you have put Margot Robbie, a very talented actress, actor, in your film. She was in with Leonardo in Wolf of Wall Street. I, Tanya. This is a, person with a great deal of acting talent, and yet you haven't really given her many lines in the movie. And I wondered, I guess that was a deliberate choice on your part, and I just wanted to know why that was, that we don't hear her actually speaking very much. And Margot, I wanted you to also comment about being in the film in this part.
Well, I just reject your hypotheses.
And then Margot Robbie is kind of like, oh, I guess I better answer for you then.
Awkwardly sitting there, yeah. But that, you just laid out exactly what I'm talking about, where there's one really interesting good film there. Sharon Tate has agency, do that revisionist history film. I also think there is a very interesting film, and the parts of this film that I did like were that transition between eras, these two movie stars, this dynamic between two men. And the thing I found really interesting is that in Tarantino's early career, he criticized Merchant Ivory and Remains of the Day so much. He would always bring it up as this sort of punchline to, I'm not making films like Merchant Ivory. And
then he did.
This is a Butler film.
It is a Butler film.
It's literally Remains of the Day in a way. He's his butler, and it harkens back to that dynamic. And there's something really interesting and sad and compelling about the two of them with this kind of dynamic. Because of the mess of the Sharon Tate Manson family stuff that's thrown in, we don't actually see all of that much of them together.
No, it's a separate film. If we do go down this road of the Sharon Tate revenge story, which it supposedly is but isn't, but if that was what was actually happening, you get a cutaway where she's being taught by Bruce Lee for her film. And Bruce Lee in the actual film in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is such a harmful and inaccurate representation of Bruce Lee and of everything that he stood for. It's a racist stereotype and it is awful. But if you have this, Sharon Tate goes and takes down the Manson family and Bruce Lee is the one teaching her how to do martial arts, that's an amazing film.
The portrayal of Bruce Lee, I think he said that it comes from There's a book where a guy criticizes Bruce Lee's behavior on the set of The Green Hornet with some of the stunt guys. And the guy that wrote that book saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and said, yeah, I think he maybe went a bit far with what I said. So even the guy that was putting forward that take on Bruce Lee didn't think that this was anywhere near accurate. Yeah, I don't love the portrayal of Bruce Lee at all in this.
This is awful.
I get why they're trying to do what he's trying to do with it.
I don't. It's
mythologizing Cliff is what they're trying to do. He's more...
Yeah, but at the expense of a really tragically...
At the expense of an icon of Hollywood of the time.
At the expense of someone who had a brilliant work ethic, who was highly skilled and highly trained, who had a really deep philosophy on fighting and on how to approach it. And why use him? If you want to make Cliff this ideal, then create another character. Don't use Bruce Lee.
Yeah. Who else do we see? We see the same kind of thing happening in a different way in Rick's storyline with, oh my God, what's he called? The Great Escape.
Oh, with Steve McQueen.
Yeah, Steve McQueen, where it's the opposite thing happening, right? Where it's Steve McQueen overshadows Rick and Cliff overshadows Bruce Lee.
But I don't think they're comparable because Steve McQueen is really hardly in it. It's more of it's just a vehicle for Rick's jealousy, right? Because he imagines himself in the footage. Because he didn't get the audition, or he auditioned and then he didn't get it. It's the Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah, it's the parallel careers that they've had where they've got to a certain stage. I think it is mirroring Steve McQueen's actual career exactly in terms of what Rick Dalton's career is, right?
Again, if we take Steve McQueen, there's that whole bit at the party where he just randomly explains who everybody is.
Wait, who's he played by? Oh my God. Because he pops up and that is such an odd sequence where he explains who Margot Robbie and
Roman Polanski
and Emil Hirsch, Jay Sebring, is that his name?
Jay Sebring, yeah.
Yeah. Damian Lewis plays Steve McQueen.
Weird casting.
Very strange casting.
Just to go back to Timothy Olyphant, and I do understand what you mean in terms of the production and how well the film is made. There's this incredible sequence where we move from an edited version of Bounty Law into seeing it being filmed, and the way that transition happens is that we see Rick mess up his lines and then they take it again, and it's this seamless transition, except I remembered it as a seamless transition, and then when I rewatched it, this is another editing issue. You have this fantastic scene where they're on this dolly track and they're moving around the table where Timothy Olyphant he says his line and then Rick forgets his line and then they have to retake it. And you really feel the tension on the set of it's film, right? We're running out of film and we have to keep going and he wants to take a break and they're like, no, keep rolling. But there's a shot before where Rick also messes up a line. And so you lose the power of that second time because he's already messed it up once. Whereas with a tight editor, you wouldn't have that first one, you would just have the second. And then when it goes straight into his trailer afterwards, the bit that you mentioned before where he's berating himself and he's hitting himself on the head and that kind of thing, we don't need 3 takes of that. We needed 1.
Yeah, I think that scene is, in terms of performance as well, Leo making fun of his own speech impediment that he's been acting as well, which I thought I thought he was very good. He's very good in everything he does, but I know what you mean about that. When we talk about the big scenes of this film and of Tarantino's career, he's really memorable for the types of scenes that you just laid out with that one, where there is a tilt in a scene and there is tension built in a scene. So when Cliff goes out to the ranch to meet the Manson family and he goes to see the owner, George, initially when he goes to see George and then he finds out that George is okay, that's tension built, relief, and then the flat tire afterwards as well. This film is sorely lacking for the length that it is on big, tense, interesting scenes with a tilt, which is the stuff that he does best. The scene in Jackie Brown when Ordell comes to kill her.
Oh, yeah. And she's in the dark.
Yeah. He keeps turning the light off.
Yeah. It's brilliant.
Fantastic because she suddenly takes charge of the scene in this way, which is so much fun. Christopher Walken in Pulp Fiction. I know you don't love that film, but his monologue.
Oh, The Watch.
Yeah, his monologue, which moves from oh, this is sweet. This guy's giving this watch the kid's dead father to him. And by the end of the monologue, you're like, this man should not be allowed near children. This is insane. Like Tim Roth in his 4 Rooms sequence as well was another one that I watched recently on your instruction. 4 Rooms is so interesting.
I need to rewatch it. But I love the concept. The kind of anthology within a film is something that I thought was really interesting. And the Rodriguez one, the Antonio Banderas one, is just so brilliant that it makes up for anything. For me, it makes up for anything else lacking in the film. So
a couple of really interesting things about 4 Rooms that I found out. One of which it was originally 5 rooms.
Okay. Doesn't have the same ring to it.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, but Richard Linklater dropped out.
Oh, wow. That's a weird addition to those 4.
It was, I think they had met at a film festival.
And maybe we should just explain what 4 Rooms is in case people haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah, good point. So 4 Rooms is an anthology film where you have Tim Roth as a bellhop going between different rooms in this
hotel,
high-class hotel.
It's his first shift.
Yeah, he's new on the job, and each room that he goes into is a different segment of the film. Each segment of the film, each room is directed by a different director. So you got Alison Anders, Alexandra Rockwell, Robert Rodriguez, and then Tarantino ends it. So the final segment is Tarantino.
And he is in it, of course.
Yes, of course. That's interesting as well, because he put himself in it, and he puts himself in it as a director, right?
Yeah.
And it was at a point in time where I think he's described this film as being a little bit of therapy.
I mean, it feels like it.
Exactly.
He just does this monologue, just a rant about Hollywood, basically.
Yeah, it's basically a coked up rant where it ends in...
Don't spoil it.
Maybe we shouldn't spoil the end, yeah. But the end is great.
The end is brilliant.
Definitely worth watching. Yeah. For the Rodriguez section in particular, which is really good. But one of the interesting things about it is that the film was originally 2.5 hours long.
That's short nowadays.
It is. I actually saw something where he was talking about Kill Bill, where he said he wouldn't have the guts to make a 4-hour film, which is why they split it in 2, which is, these days, not that unusual.
Yeah, just have an interval.
Exactly, yeah. We're looking at you, Brady. But yeah, okay, wait. So 2 things about...
So 5 Rooms. It was 5 Rooms with Linklater.
Oh, the only other thing I had to say about it was Steve Buscemi was the one that they wanted for the bellhop. And he turned it down because he'd just done a bellhop character in Barton Fink.
Oh, and he didn't want to be typecast as a bellhop.
He didn't want to be the bellhop.
I can't imagine Steve Buscemi being typecast in anything ever.
He's such an unusual guy. He's done so much interesting stuff, yeah. But so 4 Rooms, that sequence, that tilt into, let's just say, violence, or that tilt into being brought into a very different context within the space of one scene, which he's phenomenal at doing. He's also phenomenal at casting. And
wait, because just on that tilt thing and into violence, we expect violence with Tarantino.
It's baked in, yeah.
Yeah, we expect it as part of his kind of directorial persona and all of his films. But they used to be earned. It used to be earned violence. And the reason that I keep coming back to this point for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood of why I think is more than just it's not for me, is that women get brutally murdered a lot in real life. And the fact that we have this entire build-up rewriting the story of a woman who was brutally murdered, where every interaction through the whole film places the men in a position of authority, in a position of power above the women, whether it's sexual, whether it's physical, whether it's just in how much dialogue they have, in how much character they have, so that by the time we get to the end and a woman's face is smashed into a wall 8 times, it's cathartic? Like, how is that okay?
The revisionist history of it is the shortcut that he uses for that to be okay, right?
But I don't think it is okay.
But it
would have been okay if Sharon Tate had done it and she didn't, and that's why it's not okay.
I get where you're coming from in terms of, yeah.
Because the person who was murdered it's what we said before. She's the one who saves her own life. The fact that the wife, the Italian, she's just screaming. Eventually she punches one of them, but that's it. Why is she not doing more?
Yeah, we haven't built her up as a character at all, right?
No, she's just a drain on Rick's resources. That's it.
Yeah.
They don't even communicate because she doesn't speak English. It just makes no sense. And I know it's a really small thing, but smoking a cigarette and acid and then being it just doesn't make any sense.
Is that a thing? I assume it is.
So I looked it up. There's a lot of Reddit threads about it, and basically no. Like when you burn acid, it doesn't work. It destroys the chemicals. So yeah, he wouldn't have. Unless there was some that it had been dipped in that was on the end and he licked it. If he like
it was dipped on the
licked
filter,
cigarette first,
yeah.
but no, not just smoking it.
Okay, interesting.
I actually think the best character in the whole film, is it Brandy, the dog?
Oh, actually, on that point, I was looking at Letterboxd reviews.
Oh, yeah.
My favourite Letterboxd review that I found for this film was, I like the dog. That was the whole review.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I know what you mean about the way that the film sets it up and the way that the violence is meted out. It's one of those things where the Manson family in real life, the things that they did were so heinous that it's hard to see any depiction of violence being meted out against them as not being
justified.
Yeah, exactly, which is what I mean by a shortcut, right? You're right in that it doesn't earn it in the way that Jackie Brown, even Reservoir Dogs, is fantastic in the way that it uses violence.
Because we don't see it.
It's so limited.
Yeah. It's a very violent film, but we don't see it.
You think of him as a very violent filmmaker, and he definitely is a very violent filmmaker, and it's something that comes up again and again, but not quite as violent as you ever think looking back, I feel. Like the first time you see it, there is a shock element of it.
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
I don't know about that. Kill Bill was ultra violent. Also, Hateful Eight, the whole finale is super violent. There's more restraint than we think, and that's why I'm coming down hard on this film, because he has the capacity to do it. So in Hateful Eight, the violence is restricted to the end, except you have this moment in the middle, again, talking about that tilt in terms of the tension, in terms of the power. I can't remember which character it is, but someone's got a knife against someone else's throat. And the first time I saw that, he's just pushing this knife. And it's Tarantino, so you're like, he's going to slit his throat, obviously. And he doesn't. And it just holds that tension, and it is masterful. And the fact that he's playing with our expectations in that way shows intention. It's why I can't excuse this, because he has a history of really intentional writing, directing, character, the use of dialogue, those power tilts between characters within a scene, within a moment even. We've talked about that scene is it in Inglorious Basterds where all the stuff is moving on the table?
Oh, yeah. So there's a scene in Inglorious Basterds where I think Brad Pitt and Ryan from The Office.
Really?
BJ Novak. I think it's them sitting opposite from Christoph Waltz. So there's a telephone and there's a few other bits and there's a few other bits and pieces in front of Christoph Waltz at the beginning of the scene. And as the power dynamic shifts away from him to Brad Pitt and Ryan from The Office, the items on the table gradually move across the table to their side. He's placing them himself, but he's putting everything. It's a great Inglorious Basterds. I think is it the first scene of that film with Christoph Waltz?
Oh, when he's with the milk guy, with the dairy farmer.
Yes, where he finds people under the floorboards, right?
And he takes her pulse when she walks past.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned about Hateful Eight there, because he very nearly does it in the scene where Cliff goes to the ranch, other than, as you mentioned, when the tire change bit happens.
Yeah, so then there isn't the restraint. Because then he's just like beating the shit out of this guy.
If he just left, it would have been a more interesting scene, yeah. Yeah,
left. Had a conversation. Bring Sharon Tate along. I don't know. Have her involved in some way.
In the plot of the film.
Just going and watching her. Just going and watching her own films and laughing about it. We've just spent however many minutes giving examples of when he has masterfully created a character dynamic and tension and either paid it off or intentionally not paid it off. And the fact that in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you didn't even remember Margaret Qualley being in it at the beginning when you said there's no other characters. She is portrayed as this childlike sex object, and it's just so infuriating. You said we're not supposed to see Cliff as like a good guy. He's the hero in it. He is absolutely the hero in this film. You don't remember Margaret Qualley. Her name is literally Pussycat. It's just pure objectification. It's objectification in the way that the first time he sees her, she's like barefoot and carrying a jar of pickles. And then the second time we see her, she's got her legs open on a bench and he's just popped a mint and he's sat next to an ice cream truck. Like, it's all this stuff that is intentionally placed so that we see her in a specific way. Even that scene in the car when she offers him a blowjob and he checks how old she is, and then she just drops her head into his lap. Like, it's still continuing the same thing. There's no challenge. There's no criticism. There's no critique.
Yeah, I suppose the only point of any of that is drawing him out to the ranch, right? In terms of narrative point.
That's not a good enough reason.
No, I would agree, but that would be the reason that he continually sees her in that way. And it's interesting as well that she's not there at the end, right? She's not someone that gets her face smashed in.
No.
In fact, we do see Mikey Madison earlier on. Do we see Maya Hawke earlier on?
I don't know. They're probably there when they're all there, right? The whole group of them.
I remember Mikey Madison being there, and it was actually interesting to watch it back now that all of these actors, Austin Butler included, have gone on to such big things. Sydney Sweeney as well, just knocking about there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, funny, because Lena Dunham is the opposite, right? She's
Yeah,
been
Lena
quite
Dunham's
big and
there.
then
Yeah.
not much after.
Yeah, you've got a real cavalcade of, people have gone on to really big things from that Manson family.
Crime pays. At least I don't have to watch it again now.
No, never again. And guess what? You don't have to talk about it.
Oh, absolute joy.
Should we do a quick 6 degrees of Nick Holt?
Yeah, let's do it. I have not prepared.
Okay, what a surprise.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Okay. I feel like he was in something with Al Pacino.
Oh, wow. Also, this is a really odd film in the sense that Tarantino has worked with so many actors. First time working with Pacino.
I liked Pacino in this.
Pacino's fun in this. He plays that, what would you call it, that old school producer kind of guy, that sort of schmoozer kind of guy wonderfully.
I think I'm thinking of a different film.
The way I went about this one was a little bit around the houses on purpose to make it in 6 or 7 degrees.
Oh, you're trying to get it in 6?
Yeah, I think I got it in 7, so I think I did it slightly wrong. But yeah, I think I found a fun route at least.
Okay. That's nice.
How nice for you.
Okay, I'm going to go Margaret Qualley.
Yeah, great start.
And then Poor Things.
Was she in Poor Thing?
Yeah, she's the replacement Emma Stone.
Oh my God, she isn't she? Yeah.
Yeah. And then Willem Dafoe. How many is that? 3?
Margaret Qualley to Willem Dafoe.
2.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's got to be someone in Asteroid City. That's
my God, yeah.
Oh, wait, no. I'm getting so confused with all the different Oscars ones. I was like, Edward Norton. Wait, no. I need to get to some Brits. Where are my Brits at?
Willem Dafoe and Brits.
Yeah. Oh.
Come on.
Lighthouse.
Yeah.
Okay, where's the Lighthouse?
So that's one guy at least.
Oh, wait. Willem Dafoe, Nosferatu.
Oh, well done. Yeah. You didn't even need to go around the houses. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
Margaret Qualley, Willem Dafoe, straight there.
Nice.
Yeah, fantastic.
So tell me your 7.
So I went around the houses on purpose, and you'll see why. Leonardo DiCaprio was in Wolf of Wall Street with Jonah Hill, who was in Superbad, with Christopher Mintz-Plasse, who was in Kick-Ass, with Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who was in Bullet Train,
Brad Pitt.
with Brad Pitt, who was in Meet Joe Black, with Anthony Hopkins, who was in Collide with Nick Holt.
I don't think that counts as 7 because you went to Brad Pitt and Brad Pitt's in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So
that was
2.
why I did. It was going round the houses. That was why I did
But
it that way.
it doesn't count. If you've done a loop back to your house and then you leave again, then you still
I forgot my keys on that route.
So then you don't count the first bit.
Oh, fine. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Nosferatu, right? That's another one.
Yes, another one. There was a really good review of that Tarantino book, but I can't find it now. Wait, maybe it's on the Wikipedia.
What, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood novelization?
Yeah, the book. Wait, let me see.
Okay.
Oh my God, the Wikipedia page is so long.
For Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yeah, so long.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Oh, here we go. Kaylee Donaldson of Pajiba said Tarantino's skills are not best suited to the form of the novel. It's almost fascinating how the novel makes the film less interesting.
Wow, okay.
Have you got any last thoughts?
My last thoughts on Tarantino in general, outside of this film, having watched back some of his stuff, I'm surprised, and maybe it's just because the stuff that I've watched back recently, not stuff which is his more stock and trade. Maybe I need to go back and watch Inglorious Basterds, Kill Bill, that kind of era. I was just surprised at the level of restraint, which is a word that we've used a few times, that he shows in some of his films, and how his films are generally better when that is the case.
It's the editor, Sally Menke.
Yeah, you get that with so many auteurs, right? Where they have collaborators often early on. My understanding is that, I think we may have mentioned this before, but George Lucas's wife worked on the first Star Wars films with him in terms of the script stage.
She just reined it in.
And she's credited often with a lot of
the better decisions.
The better decisions when it comes to some of the relationship dynamics, when it comes to some of that dialogue, that side of things. And by the time the Phantom Menace came around, they were divorced and obviously weren't working on that together. So you get some of the laughable dialogue and insane decisions, which someone will only make when they have that much free reign, right? Sometimes, yeah, people need a better editor, better people around them to be able to say no sometimes.
Yeah, fewer yes men. That was the feeling that I had when I came out of this film the first time, apart from being absolutely livid, was like so many people said yes to so many things for this film, for this version of this film to be the one that we're seeing. And that was a shame. Oh, one thing, there's this random narration. We have the narration at the very beginning and then not again until 6 months later.
Oh, is it Kurt Russell? And he's in the film as well as a stuntman.
Yeah, he's
just some random guy in the film, essentially, in terms of the broader narrative. And he's also narrating?
And then it just goes 6 months later and that's it.
When he comes back from Italy, yeah. So from the point that he gets back from Italy, we've got the Kurt Russell narration, right?
Well, we have it right at the beginning and then not again until 6 months later.
Yeah, that is an odd choice. I think narration in that way is a very odd choice.
I think calling it odd is generous.
Maybe it goes back to editing.
Yeah, like you could just have a panel come up that says, just a title card that says 6 months later.
And there is also something to be argued in the sense that if more happened during that period of the film, then maybe they would need more narration. But because a huge amount doesn't happen and everything that does happen is relatively self-explanatory, we don't need to be told what's happening, right?
No, exactly. Maybe Kurt Russell just, I don't know, maybe he had it in his contract that he needed lines and then they had him as a stuntman.
Number of lines.
I'll just do him a narration.
Yeah, chuck him in the booth. Righty-ho, never to be discussed again.